Hello everyone. I am delighted with the opportunity to speak to you all today, especially after listening to just the tail end there of Ashley's presentation. So interesting to touch on those liberation networks and stuff, Ashley. It's something that we absolutely love doing in USU as well. But today I'm coming from more an academic rep angle. So you're definitely going to experience a couple of different perspectives, I guess, on student voice today. But as Carolina said, my name is Nicole Parkinson-Kelly, and I've been a student voice nerd since must be about 2016. So before I launched into my journey with academic representation, I know we've had a fantastic session so far, but I just want to give you all the opportunity to close your eyes, stand up, do a big stretch before we jump into the second half of the event. So feel free to turn your cameras off at this point. Close your eyes, stand up, stretch out your arms. I love stretching out my arms when I'm sitting down after working online. Stretch out your fingers, your back. We're all sitting hunched. Make sure you stretch all the way back, push your shoulders back. And obviously stretch your legs and your toes. I'm not standing up right now because if I do, you'll not see my face, but please feel free to do so. And when you sit back down, if you have a sip of water, please do take it because that always helps us re-engage. Just give you a wee second. Okay, so now that we have done that, I hope I have your full attention. And firstly, before we jump into the rest of my presentation, I want to ask you a couple of questions in the chat. We'll take them one at a time, but they'll all appear on screen at once. So the first question is, what are your academic reps' primary form of communication with the students they represent at the moment? So if we could just get a couple of examples in the chat. I'll see if I can actually view the chat. I can. So what is the primary form of communication with students between reps and students at the moment? Oh, I'm seeing some coming through here. Email, yes. WhatsApp groups. WhatsApp seems to be winning this so far. Teams, Slack. I've used Slack. I didn't realize people were using it for the student voice systems. That's brilliant. Social media, WhatsApp. Oh, there's a Uni2 person there. Fantastic. Teams, Uni2, Blackboard. Quite the variety. Okay, so they're all sort of similar things I would have used back in the day, but we will come back to that. The second question is, how are you as an officer or staff member reaching out and connecting with the rep structures? Is it any different to what your reps are using, for example? I know a couple of people said WhatsApp and things like that. I'm curious to see if there's any other methods that you use, I suppose, as staff or full-time officers to your reps. So pop those answers into the chat as well. I imagine they're probably not that much different. Social media and email, lots of emails and Teams. We definitely go down the more professional route, I suppose, whenever it's, email, WhatsApp, Teams. Do you have any particular events, for example, as well? I know there's someone said face-to-face chats. Is there any particular events that you have throughout the year to catch up? Coffee mornings? Fantastic. It's good to see quite the variety, folks. Student network forums, drop-ins. I'm really glad to see this. It's good to see that there's plenty of communication. And then the final question is conferences as well. We used to have a student voice conference too. And the final question is, do you feel your current systems of communications from grassroots students to influencing or impacting change, is that fluid? Is it effective? Has it been able to adapt to the online environment? That's probably just a yes or no question, to be honest. So from that grassroots student to real change, has that been effective and adaptable? Someone said no, not for them. I know that's something we definitely struggled with, so that's why I wanted to sort of judge what it's like in the room. Okay. Some people have been going through a lot of changes. That's really good to see. And for others, it's very much sticking to the normal systems. Okay, quite a variety of responses there. That is really good to see. So coming from a student union background, I have to thank you for your engagement. It's something that we struggle to get. Of course, our biggest fear is disengagement. So thank you very much, folks, for actually engaging in that and giving me some answers. Your responses actually really helped to set the scene for what we're going into next. So I'm just going to close the chat. I'll come back and check that later on again. So today we're going to break down this talk, I suppose, into 3 different sections. And this is very much linked to my experience. I'm no longer part of Ulster University Students' Union, so I can't speak on their behalf, but I'm here to share today about my experiences from being a course rep right up to being VP Education. So we're going to break it down into 3 different areas. Your lovely faces are covering them up for me, so I'm just going to shift you across. Pre-COVID methods and barriers to engagement. Really sort of honing in on, I suppose, my rep experience before COVID was even a thing in our headlines. We'll add the COVID dimension and what sort of solutions we trialed throughout that period, with the move to the online environment, and the increased importance of digital platforms and why we can't let them go when we return to normality or the new norm or whatever you want to call that. So there's my lovely face. Whenever I was an officer, I hated that photo, but it's there anyway. It's got the logo. That's all I needed. But yes, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview as to what my student voice experience was. My journey began in 2016. I studied social policy at Ulster University. And I was sitting in a lecture hall of, must have been about, it felt like 100 people. It probably wasn't as many as that, but it felt like a lot of people to me at the time. We were all used to classrooms of 25 to 30 before we go to uni, and suddenly you're in a massive lecture theatre. Some of you might not have experienced that yet, but hopefully you will at some point because it's a nice experience too. My lecturer very much put me on the spot to asking me to be a course rep. And I definitely felt like I had some advocacy experience from my youth sector engagement before. And I've had the opportunity to sort of represent young people, but I've never had that within my educational experience at this point. I'd never had the opportunity, for example, in school to give feedback on my curriculum or make changes on what we were being taught. So this was something very new to me, especially whenever you throw big scary terms like quality assurance and enhancement at us. I remember being really excited to help my course mates, and I really wanted to do a good job in representing them. So after my training, I was that keen bean rep, immediately made a Facebook group, frantically started searching on social media, trying to find their profiles and befriend everybody in my course, and of course add them to my page of student voice harassment. But I really just wanted to get that engagement. I really wanted to have the door open, that they could reach out to me at any point, but also that I would have the ability to share updates with them. So very much aware of a feedback loop before the terminology was in my own vocabulary. And I did try really hard, folks. I would post polls and upcoming events, opportunities, even volunteering opportunities at one point to try and get them engaged, to see that it wasn't just me feeding back to them, but what was being discussed or polls that they had to engage in, but trying to give them opportunities to anything to sort of catch their attention in the group. And for some reason, my meetings, I posted them up as well, though they didn't get a lot of engagement, as you'd expect. And I even tried to organize coffee meetups, but it really felt like shouting into a void. Nobody wanted to engage. Nobody wanted to speak up. I went on to become a school rep in my second year. So that was for the School of Applied Social and Policy Sciences, before being elected as a faculty rep in my final year, where I was also hired to be a student trainer to train our course reps in their roles. So I did my training with Sparks in Scotland. Some of you might have heard of them. And I did have some engagement with NSTEP as well in Ireland too. But yes, these roles primarily meant I was already engaging with the already converted, if you will, working directly with course reps and school reps to help resolve more universal issues, of course. But their struggle still persisted, like mine did for my first year as a course rep. So we weren't really addressing the issue. I just managed to move away from it. So that's something that we wanted to review. And the word student engagement and the figures surrounding that started to haunt me as a VP Education. When I joined the Quality Assurance Agency Student Strategic Advisory Committee, what a tongue twister. But in SAC, we discussed the student learning experience, we give our perspective and QAA strategy, we develop new policy or amended current policy, all in the best interest of students in higher education. But naturally, within that, a topic we often discussed was around student engagement in student voice structures. So why do students fear giving feedback? I would always wonder that. Actually, can we stop there for a second? I'm going to pop up in the chat again. Why do you think that students worry about giving feedback, in whether it's in these group chats or whether it's on those Facebook group pages? Why is there a hesitancy to offer honest feedback? Does anybody have any experience in that area as to what they think, I suppose, would be barriers to that? Yeah, it's a very good point. Some people don't realize the union is separate from the uni. I suppose there'll definitely be worries around that in case there was friends. Apathy, yeah. Oh gosh, there's lots of things going here. They don't want to get staff in trouble. Yes, I've heard that quite a few times, because sometimes people want to offer feedback and it's constructive, but they don't want to hurt feelings of staff. That does happen too. Might impact their, yes, repercussions, definitely. I've heard that being a common one. Feedback won't make impact. The worry that will impact them personally. Staff might treat them differently. We're all sort of saying similar things here. So yeah, that is fab. Just going to jump to the next slide. I love how I've spelled hesitant there, folks. Let's just skip over that. So for me, in terms of why students were hesitant in bringing honest feedback to staff, we have repercussions that a lot of people have talked about. Lack of action, again, somebody did bring that up too. Not being heard. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely find sometimes where there was group chats and maybe the thread, you'd be lost in the thread in terms of your feedback, and other people might be heard over you. An appropriate discussion platform needed. So I don't know, but for me, my social media platform was very much my space to go to relax and access, I suppose, photos of people's nights out and, you know, catch up on videos I enjoyed. The last thing sometimes I wanted to do was bring, you know, serious conversations to my social platforms. That was my place to switch off. I was finished with uni, I was finished with work. So yeah, there was definitely a barrier in that sense as to what was appropriate. So just going to skip to the next slide and get past the typos. We'll pretend they didn't exist. So on top of the everyday barriers, UESU were undergoing a period of expansion and change in their student voice structures. In the last 5 years, the level of the school and the department reps was introduced, and the faculty rep positions were established and firmly embedded. I was actually one of the first rounds of faculty reps whenever I was elected in, was that 2018? Yeah, 2018-19. So it was a very new structure, and from going from just course reps to adding 2 new levels was definitely a massive change. And development in any area can bring growing pains, as we would all expect, and they are inevitable. And in this case, it was the communication channels between reps and the student body that was under pressure. So as you can see, we had quite a large student rep system. We had over 800 course reps, we had 30 school department reps, 4 faculty reps, and of course our 7 student officers. So it was quite a comprehensive system. It wasn't quite as easy as making a massive group chat. That would be a horrendous group chat. We would all mute it. So we needed a more concise structure or a dedicated space for those conversations. I hope people can pick up on the, I suppose, pun in the title, our survey says. Through feedback from our members, student reps and officers, we identified 3 core areas for improvement within the academic rep structure. So the first one was improvement of our engagement and communication between reps and students, which is something I directly experienced. We wanted to create a greater awareness of course reps and student voice mechanisms. And we wanted to provide a more consistent and equitable approach to gathering collective and real-time student feedback. And just to add another spanner to the works, new GDPR legislation was passed during my time as VP Education, which made it even more difficult for our course reps, and particularly to reach out to the students within their cohorts without going and asking them individually what their email addresses were and what their phone numbers were. They had to go and ask about those individually, so it made it very difficult. Our officer team and our student voice team at USU at the time put together a proposal on moving towards a digital solution, which was supported by our Pro Vice Chancellor for Education. And this was when Uni 2 was first proposed. The project was developed and driven in collaboration, and we love partnership, have to throw the partnership buzzword in there, with the Students' Union, Student Exec Team, the PVC for Learning Enhancement. We worked with partners for our Office for Digital Learning, and we also worked with our Associate Deans for Education. I hope you'll appreciate the creativity of this slide. I really tried, folks. So we're now going to enter into the COVID dimension. Enter stage left. We have our little COVID virus cell. I'm not from a science background, folks. This is our little COVID bean. We have lockdown. We have the closure of access to university buildings. We have the massive shift to online learning. At some point, we also face the likes of homeschooling. And of course, when we say illness, I've thrown that up there, but I don't mean that term loosely. Obviously, COVID is still very prominent in our lives. But when I say illness, it's not your stereotypical illness where people may be off for 2 to 3 days. We're talking weeks here, and people who are vulnerable, maybe even longer than that. And we have long-term COVID as well. So just thought that was important to highlight. So as you can expect, we really needed to accelerate with our plans, as our student voice structures were needed now more than ever before. And with those growing pains that we mentioned beforehand, we really needed to nip those issues in the bud as best as we could. We had to ensure that all students, regardless of location, were able to raise issues that were impacting in their learning experience. So a lot of those topics that would have came up would have been around digital poverty and lack of access to, I suppose, tech, different tech, and maybe even Wi-Fi for people living in rural areas. We had our student parents and carers who were concerned about balancing their studies with homeschooling, and student carers who may be caring for vulnerable people who had to completely self-isolate for several months. And of course, all of that whilst doing a degree and doing their studies at the same time. With over 26,000 students at Ulster, 4 campuses, 4 faculties, about 25 to 30 schools and departments, and hundreds of courses, the disparity of the learning experience was to be expected, especially with the rapid adaptation to the online environment. So we needed an effective and collective communication method so officers and reps could act quickly and resolve issues on ground levels and universally, whilst also closing the feedback loop. Because I don't know, for me at that time, there was definitely a lot of students feeling anxiety. There was definitely a heightened need for, I suppose, being comforted. So, closing the feedback loop has always been important, but I think it was even more prominent during COVID and during those rapid changes, because people were feeling quite panicked at, their social lives had rapidly changed. Their educational aspect of their lives had completely changed. There was just on every front, even family dynamics and living away from home and maybe not being able to go home for several months. There was a lot of mental well-being tolls. So offering a little bit of comfort, I think, was really important at this time. So closing that feedback loop was important at that point, even more so than previously. So the decision was taken to launch Uni 2 in semester 2 of the academic year 2021. So we're going to touch on now the importance of digital platforms at that time and moving forward. So to measure the importance and the impact of a digital student voice platform, full stop, we conducted a pre-survey and post-survey of the pilot. This was done in partnership with university staff, with our student voice staff in the Students' Union, with myself as VP Education at the time. I believe my follow-up, Grace Boyle, is here somewhere in this call today. So just a big hello there too. But yes, and we also engaged with our student reps when it came to this survey. We know digital platforms are important to increase accessibility, particularly for distance learners, for student parents and carers, for part-time students. Generally, and this is a general sweeping comment, but those groups generally spend less time on campus due to just even in normal circumstances with responsibilities and other commitments. So particularly now in COVID, they were missing out on that even more. So they were missing out on those face-to-face events as it was already. And obviously now they've been completely cut at that point. So it was really rewarding to actually see some impact with our reps and our students, especially whenever, it came to those hard to reach groups. So based on this feedback, we saw a 14% increase in student awareness in knowing who the course rep was. And this came from the introduction of the student voice platform, Uni 2 at the time. A 12% increase in satisfaction levels around how student voices have been heard at Ulster University. A 7% increase in students believing that they have the right opportunities to provide feedback. And a 14% more students saying that it was clear how students' feedback was being acted on. And that last one, I think, was really impactful at the time, because it was something we really wanted to see results on, and especially in COVID. So overall, the surveys provided a generally positive indication in the value of the introduction of Uni 2 for students and reps at the time. We need to see continued use of digital platforms generally. Now, I know we're all here today under the Uni 2 branch. Uni 2 is something that we used. It's not by any means the only method you can use, but I just think it's really important today that the message coming away from here is the importance of that digital access to the student voice mechanisms. So whether that's through Uni 2, whether that's through other means, having a dedicated platform where reps and students can come together, have those conversations, receive direct updates, and get that feedback in terms of when their feedback has been acted on. That's extremely important. But just to give you a positive example of what we had from Uni 2 in particular, obviously during COVID, we had the issue of moving to the online environment for learning and teaching. So something that we advocated for in UUSU was recorded lectures and captioning. And this was an issue that was brought up on the university board. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, on Uni 2 you have your school boards. I believe you can have your course boards if you want that implemented. And you can also have your university board, which was really useful for those universal problems. So recorded lectures, live lectures, and captioning were all brought up on the university board. There was definitely a trend towards self-paced learning with the increase of caring responsibilities and homeschooling and general illnesses, so missing out on classes over weeks at a time. So give flexibility for learners whenever we offered recorded lectures. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was really good to see students from a variety of different courses and schools and faculty backgrounds coming together to feedback and comment into this thread about what their needs were in terms of learning and teaching that year. And it was really useful. And what we didn't expect was the demand for live lectures. The demand for live lectures was quite high, as long as for others it was recorded afterwards and captioned afterwards. But people wanted the ability to engage, to ask questions, to speak to their academic staff. And that was particularly important, not just from a learning perspective, but from a social perspective. The word lockdown, the word isolation has been thrown about a lot, but it was something that has definitely impacted us all for the past 18 months. So having that ability to have, even today, we're having these live conversations with the ability to talk to each other was just really, really important for well-being as well. So we're going to skip on to the next slide. So what did Uni 2 bring to the table for us? Just like how digital access to learning and teaching has been a massive step forward, so is a platform like this, which actively measures impact through the Together We Change section, where we've data insights, which addresses some of the reservations students were having in sharing feedback in the first place. So what did Uni 2 bring? Well, we had that constant 24/7 opportunity and ease of access for all students to give that feedback. I think that's something we touched on briefly with Ashley, that idea that, student feedback is not just 9 to 5, it is beyond that. And it's not that people expect an immediate response, outside of those hours, but the opportunity to share that feedback before you forget to do it, or maybe you don't have the opportunity to do it 9 to 5. So it just offers that ability to do that. It also offers an accurate and a range of feedback for reps to better their ability in delivering their roles. So basically it provides a little bit of accountability for reps too. They're not going in just representing their own opinions in meetings anymore. They're going in to represent a variety of opinions from their courses. Closing the feedback loop, of course, too, seeing that real impact. through real-time discussions and the options to update directly on threads too. And the confidence of the optional anonymity to combat any worries of repercussion with the safety of moderators. We don't have those in group chats. Group chats can get heated and targeted. Something we found that was a real strength of Uni 2 was we had that moderation in place, and we also had that protection in place for students, so there wasn't that repercussion. So just going to move on quickly to our challenges that we faced, because there definitely were plenty, but these were the main ones. There were challenges around the ownership and responsibilities in managing, supporting and embedding a digital student voice platform between the institution and the Students' Union. Who owned it, who was going to moderate it, and who's going to be on there answering, I suppose, different comments and questions. The answer to that really was our reps were there to respond to any student queries, the SU staff were there to help support that where necessary, and the academic staff were there to help carry those conversations through and give direct actions. And the second challenge we had was building confidence with the platform. Because the pilot wasn't that long, it was only, all of this was done within a year. We definitely needed to build more confidence within the platform to get more buy-in from academic staff so we could actually continue the project. And I know that's something that's an ongoing challenge, even in my absence as I've gone. And the last one was anonymity and staff concerns, which I'm sure everyone's itching to hear about. The last I was engaged, the Uni 2 team were working really hard to iron out any misconceptions of the safety of the platform for staff wellbeing linked to the anonymity tool. The anonymity tool actually gives students a lot of confidence to give honest feedback. And because there is that 3-strike policy there and the option to report different comments, it is a safe platform, unlike those group chats where those comments could be said flippantly, and maybe that inability to actually delete those comments, or names might be thrown about. And we did bring in a change as a result from that too. We didn't want staff names being used directly. If there's something personal that needed to be raised, we actively sort of recommended that those weren't shared on a public platform. And we kept the feedback very, very sort of specific around the learning experience rather than about individuals. So we are on the last couple of slides, folks. I'm aware time is tight, so I will speed up a little bit. So to conclude, the digital student voice platform generally having that option of a dedicated place really helped to improve engagement and communication between students and reps, SU staff and reps, and offered a dedicated platform for all things student voice without infringing on personal or social time on social media platforms. It offered greater awareness of course reps and student voice mechanisms among the student body, and it provided a consistent and equitable approach to gathering collective, real-time student feedback, and that was incredibly important during COVID. And the reason why it actually spread more awareness of course reps was because students were automatically enrolled in Uni 2. So whenever they went into their portal, they could go into Uni 2 itself and they were automatically had an account. They just had to activate it. So that's why it helped increase the knowledge there. From my understanding too, Uni 2 also offered an ability to host the likes of elections and stuff. So that's definitely something that could be enhanced on if you'd more time with it. It wouldn't be a student voice presentation without the student learning experience diagram being thrown into the mix. So 6 of these branches are things that you would have conversations about with your students anyway, but an area that we often sort of lack or forget about in terms of our everyday and our daily work is quality enhancement and insurance. And when I first came into my role, those terminologies completely threw me. Very intimidating, but whenever you break it down to what that actually means, it isn't that scary, and it is definitely one of the most important. So for me, having a digital student voice platform really helped to bridge gaps within that, such as students feeling staff and departments were receptive to student concerns and suggestions. Students felt that their opinions were being listened to and taken seriously. They were seeing real improvements throughout their study because they direct updates on those comment threads, and they could see the conversations taking place online, as well as getting feedback from the Zoom meetings, for example, directly on the Uni 2 platform. And there was definitely a feeling of a strong student voice structure embedded in their course whenever there was a platform dedicated to it. So we're on to the final slides, folks. Just a couple of reflections, basically, from that entire experience, the roller coaster of COVID, and us trying to find a digital answer for student voice. We would have had our student voice conferences, our staff student consultative committee meetings. We really did rely on those face-to-face engagements. So, and we did have discussion boards on Blackboard, but they just weren't really used. So this was something completely new for us. But some really important reflections to take from this are student voice platforms or digital platforms are there to enhance, not replace current measures. They're there to support them. Face-to-face is still very much needed, and it still has a place going forward. It offers, but I suppose a digital platform offers that specialized, dedicated place for 24/7 feedback, action planning, and that accountability with that, and direct updates and issues. So we shouldn't lose the digital aspect whenever we're going forward into this new normal. It helps to include hard to reach student groups, those ones who are distance learners, the part-timers, the ones who don't get as much of a campus experience, generally speaking anyway. And it also had the accountability and tracking of issues too. And when I say that, it wasn't necessarily about staff, it was about the whole system altogether, just closing that feedback loop. I wrote a recent article for the Educational Developments magazine with CETA on ensuring digitization of the student learning experience doesn't become a fast fashion trend that disappears with COVID. Why would we lose quality and go back to where we began when we've made such developments to better our supports and communications to students? COVID has impacted so many parts of our lives, but it has accelerated advancements in others. So there's definitely opportunity and challenge. But that is everything for me today, folks. I hope I'm gone over time too much, but now we have, I believe, some time for questions. So thank you all so much for listening.